Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Shishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari. So we have come to the session Will and Memory. I feel that before we start this section, let us again read those two verses which we are going to be understanding the explanation of. Right? Page 8, the 17th verse. Vayura anilam amritam athedam bhasmantam shariram Om kratosmara kritam smara kratosmara kritam smara. The breath of things is an immortal life, but of this body ashes are the end. Om, O will, remember that which was done. Remember, O will, remember that which was done. Remember. Agne naya supatharaye asman vishwani deva vayunani vidwan yuyodhyasma juhranam eno bhuyishtham te nama uktim vidhima. O God Agni, knowing all things that are manifested, lead us by the good path to the felicity. Remove from us the devious attraction of sin. To thee, completest speech of submission we would dispose. So, let us understand, what is this life about? The whole point of life, the aim of life, is to gradually grow into the likeness of the divine, Madhbhava. Now, since we are on the section which is talking about will, memory, which means our mind, that means it is going to give us a guidance that what does this mental will have to do? We have to become in the likeness of the divine. So for the time being, for these two verses, we are going to be talking about the mental will. Our mental will also must start aligning itself with the real will, Kratu. And how can this happen? How can this happen but by connecting with Kratu? If I want to become like someone, we have to connect with that someone. We have to go on connecting with that someone, letting the influence of that someone come upon us. When it starts coming upon us, then I become like that person. So now if the mental will has to become like the divine, it has to connect with the Kratu, with the will, which is the divine within us, the divine will within us. The Antaratma, which is called Kratu. And the Isha Upanishad, as we just read, says, remember what was done, remember what was done. Now, if our mental will has to remember what was done in the past many lives, how can the mental will remember unless it connects with something or someone who has been there in all the past lives, and it carries the memory with it and is going to continue in the future lives and is going to carry this memory too with it. The only way for the mental will to remember is to connect with Kratu, because that Kratu is also called the Antaratma and is also called the soul and is also called the Jata Veda. Jata Veda, Jata means born, Veda means to know. So he who knows all that was born, all that is born, all that will be born. That is what Kratu is. That is what the will is. And so the importance of connecting with the Jata Veda, with the Agni, with the Antaratman, which is there within us. Right? With this as an introduction, let us start reading the section Will and Memory. This is on page, I think everybody must be having it already, page 77. This journey consists in a series of activities continued from life to life in this world with interval of life in other states. So, the journey of the individual's eternal consciousness after death of the body comprises of two phases, which are the journey into the other worlds after death. You know, there are other worlds, and we've talked about it several times. And the journey into future lives after reincarnating into a new body. So, this journey consists in a series of activities continued from life to life. In this world, we come back here, then we come back here again, and in the interval, our life is in other states. So, these are the two parts. The life principle maintains them. It supplies their material in the formative energy which takes shape in them. We talked about Matarishwan last time. Yes. Yes.
What life in other states? Does it mean having different yoni?
Not yoni, Amita. It is, we have talked about it earlier, that once this physical body goes into becomes ashes.
Different planes, you mean to say different planes?
Yes, different planes of consciousness. So the soul is carried by Matarishwan into different planes of consciousness. So that is one part of the journey, and the second part of the journey is reincarnation into another body.
I was wondering, state refers to planes only, no?
It refers to the different planes of consciousness that the soul moves into. Right? The life principle maintains them. It supplies their material in the formative energy which takes shape in them. So, we talked about Matarishwan the last time, that it is Matarishwan or the life principle which imparts energy to the various activities during these multiple lives. But their presiding God is not the life principle, it is the will. So, Matarishwan helps it gives the energy, the force to take the soul into the different planes. But it is not the guiding principle, it is not the overriding principle. What is the overriding principle? The overriding principle is the will, the kratu. Although the vital force may give energy, but it is presided over by will or Agni or the soul, which actually observes them but without interfering, without any detailed and distinct involvement or suggestion. The whole work, the whole journey is presided over by will, but without taking any active part, without presiding over or interfering. Will is kratu, the effective power behind the act. Now here I would like everybody to open page 8 again and read the footnote. We have done it in detail, but we'll do it again. The footnote for kratu. But we must understand, what does this word kratu really mean? Kratu means two things. The Vedic term kratu means sometimes the action itself. Now the action is taking place from where? By the body, by the mind, by the vital. So kratu means, in the Vedic term kratu means sometimes the action itself, sometimes the effective power behind action, represented in mental consciousness by the will. So what does it mean? It means that sometimes the word kratu is used for the action itself, so which is a limited action by the body, vital and mind. and sometimes it means the effective consciousness behind the action, which is the consciousness of Kratu, capital K. The same K is small, and the same K can be the big K, which means will, with a capital W, which means the soul. Agni is this power, right? He is divine force, which then after that we do. So here Sri Aurobindo is saying, will is Kratu. Will is Kratu, the effective power behind the act. Will or Kratu or Agni is the actual power or driving force behind our action. Though it may not seem so in the surface consciousness. Does the surface consciousness feel all the time that I have an effective consciousness, a power which is acting from behind and actually propelling the mind, the vital and the physical? We don't feel that. But the real driving force comes from the will or Kratu or Agni or Antaratman or soul. Now, what is the nature of that consciousness? It is of the nature of consciousness. It is energy of consciousness. And although present in all forms, conscious, subconscious, or superconscious, vital, physical, or mental, yet comes into its kingdom only when it emerges in mind. So, what is will or Agni or Kratu? Will or Agni or soul or Kratu is consciousness itself. It is the creative working of consciousness in all its forms. Everything is a play of consciousness. Now, as we gave this example earlier also, we have bulbs in the home, we have fans, air conditioners. But would they work if there were no force of electricity? They work because they have a force of electricity which empowers them to do the work. Similarly, Kratu or will or Agni is that consciousness which empowers the mind, vital and body to actually work. Therefore, we can safely say that everything is a play of the soul or Agni or will, be it in any state, be it in the surface consciousness or subconscious life or superconscious or vital, mental or physical. Now, it is only when the consciousness emerges in the mind that the will or Agni finds its own element. Or one can say it is only once the mental consciousness has evolved that the soul finds a more cooperative medium or a cooperative instrument for its working. Right? Because why? The physical is the grossest part of our being. More refined than the physical is our vital being. More refined than the vital being is the mental being. The more refined we get, the more the will or Agni is able to use that refined substance as its own instrument. So the mind is the most refined instrument out of physical, vital and mental. So when the will is able to work through the mind, it finds the most conducive instrument. Right? This is what he means when he says, yet comes into its kingdom only when it emerges in mind. It uses the mental faculty of memory to link together and direct consciously the activities towards the goal of the individual. So it uses the mental faculty of memory. Now Agni, as consciousness of the mental level, uses the faculty or instrumentality of memory to link together and orient and consciously direct man's activities towards the realization of eventual of the eventual spiritual goal, which is the spiritual goal, which is a goal of an individual's life. After all, each life of an individual, each life, many past lives we've had, each life, even it would seem like a most mundane life, an eventless life, still each life is actually a spiritual milestone. And all the activities of that life are eventually leading to a partial arrival towards that goal. Each life is taking us partially or greatly towards that goal. It's leading us towards that goal, that spiritual fulfillment, that madhbhavam that we are talking about. Each life is important. It is consciousness. When it actually starts functioning in the mind, then it produces self-awareness. When consciousness starts working in the mind, it starts producing memory. And it is this memory which provides a continuity between the past lives, this life, and future lives. There are people who remember so much of their past life. Why? Because their mind, their mental will, has become so refined that the kratu, the capital K kratu, the soul, its memory is being transmitted directly through the mental will. And the mental will has aligned itself with the supreme will within us. Everything in this world is the outcome of the working of kratu, the divine will. Kratu stands for the power of the supreme consciousness or the driving force of the supreme consciousness. And kratu, this will, is responsible for non-conscious objects of matter, subconscious, conscious, vital, mental, superconscious. But when it starts operating in the mind, I repeat myself, with the individual mental will, that is to say, then that comes into its real form. So every birth is a milestone on the soul's journey towards its final destination. But each birth has some individual goals, certain goals that it has to achieve, and certain experiences that it has to undergo. However, because of the limited mental consciousness, its will depends on its memory, which is limited, which is confined to only its immediate circumstances. So we remember and live only in the immediate present. आज क्या हुआ, कल क्या हुआ, परसों क्या हुआ, इस लाइफ में क्या हुआ. And to a large extent, we forget our past actions. But the higher will has a very wide perspective. And it is able to see all the actions as a development and forward movement of the soul's journey. We may see an action or an event and say, I have wasted this moment and I have not grown by it. But even in that moment when we feel we have wasted it, we have actually grown. Every moment is taking us slowly, gradually towards the ultimate fulfillment. In the last para of this section, it is this will which is invoked so that the journey in future lives becomes a conscious progress towards the soul's forward journey. So that there would be no more wanderings, no more scattering. Our journey shouldn't be scattered. We should be very cohesively, with a focus, we should be moving ahead in this life, and that focus should take us towards future lives. So this statement is clear now. It uses the mental faculty of memory to link together and direct consciously the activities towards the goal of the individual. In man, I'm reading further, in man, the use of consciousness by the mental will is imperfect because memory is limited. Our action is both dispersed and circumscribed because mentally we live from hour to hour in the current of time, holding only to that which attracts or seems immediately useful to our egoistic mind. What Sri Aurobindo is saying here is our mental consciousness is a very limited consciousness. And because the mental consciousness is a limited consciousness, therefore our memory, which is actually responsible for the continuity, to keep the dhaga alive, life to life to life to life, what is important is our memory. But our mental consciousness is limited. And therefore, our memory, which is responsible for the continuity of our individual personality, is also limited. Our mental faculty is limited, so the memory is limited. And because of the limitation of memory on which our actions are based, what becomes limited? Our actions also are lacking in focus. They are dispersed and they are hemmed, they are contained. So because the mental faculty is limited, the memory is limited. And therefore the action that comes out of us is also hemmed in, is also contained, is not perfect. We live in the present from moment to moment. And what do we take cognizance of? We take cognizance of what our egoistic mind regards to be supremely relevant to it. At this present moment, my mind may insane amount of importance to something which has no relevance to the focus of my life. But my ego, if that ego is great, it will give insane amount of importance to something that is not important for this focused life. In fact, in the Life Divine, once we talked about the 7 ignorances that Sri Aurobindo talks about in the Life Divine. And in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo has identified our tendency to live in the present alone and forget our past and be unaware of our future. So when we live in the present only and we do not have any memory of the past and not interested in the past or in the future, that is called psychological ignorance. Someday we'll do the 7 ignorances again. Now we'll continue to read. We live in what we are doing. We live in what we are doing. We do not control what has been done, but are rather controlled by our past works, which we have forgotten. This is because we dwell in the action and its fruits instead of living in the soul and viewing the stream of action from behind it. See, our consciousness always remains confined to what we are doing in the present. And we cannot control or influence the past. On the contrary, we are under, whether it is a veiled control or an unveiled influence, but we are under the influence of the past, which we have forgotten. In the past, something had happened which had given us some kind of a memory which drives our actions further. Somebody had said something to me, and that made me kind of clam up against that person. And now I may have forgotten what that person had said, but my memory says, I don't like that person. And with that memory, we continue to do our future actions. Right? So what we are doing today may be influenced by the past. Our perspective is usually based on an action and its result or its fruit, whereas the perspective of the soul is quite different. It's very different. So Sri Aurobindo is saying here that since every action originates from the will or kratu or the inhabitor or the soul, man too instead of focusing on the action and its future result, should focus and should live it from the soul outward. Can you see the difference? What he means is exactly what Sri Krishna had exalted Arjuna to do in the Bhagavad Gita. That whatever you are doing, don't do it from the mind. Don't do it from the vital. Don't do it just like a mechanical action. Let that action emit from the soul. How will the action emit from the soul? Because the mind has thought of the action. So you can ask a question, how can an action which has been conceived of by the mind emit from the soul? The whole thing is so simple because Sri Krishna has put it so simply that whatever action you have conceived of, you bring it forward, offer it to the soul. Let it be, let it incubate in the soul for some time. And let it emerge from the soul outward. Why should we do this? Because the Isha Upanishad is saying again and again, Krato smara, Krato smara, Krato smara, Krato smara. Who will have that memory? Who has that memory? The soul has that memory. The mind doesn't have that memory. And if we want continuity in our actions, we have to go back to that which has the memory. And we have to go back to that which has the memory in everything we do. Till finally our actions actually starting from whatever the soul's will is. That is what the body wants to do. What is the soul's will? That is what the vital wants to do. Till we reach that point that it is happening automatically from the soul outwards. Till we reach that point, when the mind wants to do something, let it offer to the soul and say, let thy will be done, not mine. When the vital is getting angry, the vital is feeling emotional, let the vital cool itself down and go to the soul and say, oh soul, I don't want this anger to flow out. Then the Kratusmara will actually start happening. However long it takes, it doesn't matter. God is in no hurry. The inhabitor is in no hurry. What is important is how focused am I to move into that direction. How much of my focus is driven to move in that direction today. How much aspiration do I have that whatever action comes out of me, whatever emotions come out of me, whatever thoughts come out of me, let them emerge from the soul outward. That is what is important. Our intention is important. Our focus is important. So, the Lord, the true will, stands back from the actions and therefore is their Lord and not bound by them. The Lord, the true will, stands back from the actions and therefore is their Lord and not bound by them. The Lord or Agni or the true will actually stands back. This Agni does not come and enforce what it wants to get done. It does not enforce its will. It stands back and it gives consent to the individual. It gives consent to the individual will to flow the way it wants to flow. Remember, even when Krishna gave the whole Gita ka Gyan to Arjun, did he say, this is the way you should do things? What were his words, Mona ma'am? I have given you the entire Jnana, but now you do as you think is right. I don't remember the exact Sanskrit. Mona?
यथा इच्छसि तथा करो
हाँ, यथा
इच्छसि तथा करो
हाँ, तुम्हारी जैसी इच्छा है, as you want, you do. I have told you what I had to tell you, but now you do as you want to do. Even then, Krishna doesn't enforce that now this is the way you have to do it. Similarly, the soul does not enforce anything. The soul is the lord of the action, but he does not compel any action from us, and is neither bound by our actions. Whatever action we do, the soul is not bound by it. What does the soul do then? The soul only collects experiences. Whatever has been done, the experience is collected by the soul. The Upanishad solemnly invokes the will to remember the thing that has been done, so as to contain and be conscious of the becoming. So the Upanishad seriously and sincerely calls the will, invokes the will or kratu to remember, to keep in mind all the conscious efforts that were done in the past, to remember all the successes that were achieved in the past, even though the successes were partial, so that the continuity of the streams of action is remembered not only by the will, not only by Agni, but also by the mental being which is in the manifestation. But that can only be done when the mental being actually connects to the will. The Upanishad solemnly invokes the will to remember the thing that has been done, so as to contain and be conscious of the becoming, so as to become a power of knowledge and self-possession, and not only a power of impulsion and self-formulation. So, the Upanishad is remembering the will, invoking the will, capital W, so that the will, the mental will, which is at present driven by compulsions, by impulsions, by actualizations, self-actualizations. Now it is invoking that will, so that this will with a small w, becomes a power of knowledge, which not only understands itself, but it also gets controlled and possessed by the higher self. Got it? It's clear that why is this will, why is the mental will, why is the Upanishad invoking the higher will? So that this will, which is right now run by impulsions and compulsions, finally becomes a power of knowledge. It not only understands itself and controls, but becomes controlled by the higher will. It will thus more and more approximate itself to the true will and preside over the coordination of the successive lives with a conscious control. By this continuous invocation, when we go on and on and on, invoking the higher will, the mental will gradually become more and more aligned to the real will, and will be able to achieve control. And this will be able to achieve control over all the successive lives by aligning the mental will to itself. But this will not be done by any act of compulsion of the higher will. This will only be done when mental will invites the higher will to take charge. Is this clear up to now?
Perfect.
So I'll read further. Instead of being carried from life to life in a crooked path, as by winds, it will be able to proceed more and more straight in an ordered series, linking life to life with an increasing force of knowledge and direction, until it becomes the fully conscious will, moving with illumination on the straight path towards the immortal felicity. By this alignment, this alignment of the lower will and the higher will, or you can call it Agni or Kratu or soul or Antaratman, the journey becomes more and more straight. We were talking of the Riju Pantha, the straight path which goes directly towards its goal, direct and coordinated, where the link between each individual life, the past life, the life before that, the life before that, all these links are forged together, joined together by what? By the thread of increasing knowledge and direction. There is a purpose and there is knowledge, and this knowledge is joined, this higher knowledge, which is the supreme knowledge, which is here sitting in this will, is aligned to the mental knowledge. And then this forging of past lives, because of the memory that is here, is actually given to the mind. And then this forging happens. And there is a direct movement towards the goal. And this process will go on till that time that the lower will and the higher will move in a conscious unity on a straight path, Rijutani, a straight path of knowledge and immortal Ananda. In the absence of such alignment of these two wills, the lower will and the higher will, the motion of the lower will always follows a crooked path, what we called Duritani, as if it is whirled about without any direction by strong winds. Sometimes it is pushed here, sometimes it's pushed there, because it is still not found that straight, direct path. And that straight and direct path will be found by the mental will only when it starts becoming conscious that there is within me the higher will. And there is within this mental will, the lower will, a power by which it can invoke. There is within this mental will a small flame of aspiration. And here is the real flame of aspiration. And this small flame of aspiration starts pouring itself into this big flame of aspiration. This big flame of aspiration takes over the mental will and they become aligned. And this mental will, through this will shoots its arrows, and straight through the mental will, the arrow goes directly towards the mental will. Kratu becomes what it at present only represents, the divine will Agni. So, at present, our lower will or mental will, Kratu with a small k, is only a poor reflection, or we can say simulacrum of the divine will, Agni or soul. But as we start invoking this Agni, through all our thoughts, our emotions and actions, as we offer all that we are doing to Agni and inviting it to lead us as the Purohita, as the leader of the action, the two wills, the lower and the higher will, slowly and slowly and slowly and slowly, they get aligned. And then our future lives also become consciously chosen steps towards the eventual consummation. There is a beautiful poem of Sri Aurobindo, Ishvara to Ishvari. I'll just read a few lines from there. See, I didn't get the time to do a proper reading. Otherwise, I would have given it as a reference. Mona ma'am will send it as the next reference on the Isha group. In some strange dawn, in some dim eve, like a gesture
It is there.
It is there?
Yes. I'll just open it.
Oh, thank you so much, Mona. Oh, I sent a picture of it.
Yeah.
In some strange dawn, in some dim eve, like a gesture of light, like a dream of delight, thou comest, nearer and nearer to me. Sri Aurobindo, Ishvara to Ishwari. Thank you. Want to read it again? In some strange dawn, in some dim eve, like a gesture of light, like a dream of delight, thou comest nearer and nearer to me. Thank you, Mana. We can proceed into the next section if everybody is clear about this section. Everybody is clear about this section. It wasn't such a difficult section. Should we go ahead then?
Yes, yeah, we can.
Okay. So the next section is will and knowledge. The essentiality of the divine will is that in it, consciousness and energy, knowledge and force are one. See, we all remember what Duryodhan said to Krishna. Dharmam janami nachame pravritti. Adharmam janami nachame nivritti. Means, I know what is dharma, but I don't have the force of will to follow the path of dharma. Adharmam janami nachame nivritti. I know what is adharma, but I don't have that force of will to be able to take me away from adharma. So what happens is that I have the consciousness, I have the knowledge, but the force does not align itself with that consciousness, with that energy, with that knowledge, with the consciousness and knowledge, my force does not align itself. T.S. Eliot had written something very beautiful. He had summed up our ordinary lives as between the ideal and the reality. When he says reality, he means what is actually happening in life. Between the ideal and the reality, between the idea with a capital I and its execution, there falls a shadow. देखते हैं ना हम लोग भी. There are many times that we want to do something that's really marvelous, that's really beautiful, which will make us feel good about being what we are. But by the time we actually do the execution of the action, there is a huge gap. So, between the ideal and the reality, between the idea and its execution, there falls a shadow. Such is the status of our ordinary lives. But here, Sri Aurobindo is saying that there is no dichotomy, there is no discrepancy between consciousness and its power, between knowledge, or we can call it idea with a capital I, and the force which executes it. Why? Because for they are all one. It knows all manifestations, all things that take birth in the world. Why? Because it is Jataveda. This Agni, this Antaratman is also called Jataveda. It knows all the past births, it knows all the future births. It understands or knows all that is to be manifested. All things that will come into existence in this manifested world, all the things that have come into existence in the manifested world, all that this will Kratu knows. Right? Knowledge of all births. This supreme consciousness, will, force, idea, is called Jata Vedas in the Vedas. Because Jata means that which is born and Vedas means the knower. It knows them in the law of their being, in their relation to other births, in their aim and method, in their process and goal, in their unity with all and their difference from all. So, it knows the very essence of all manifestation. What Sri Krishna calls in the Gita, Jnanam Sa Vijnanam Cha. It knows everything. आज के दिन what is the relationship between me and you? It knows all, and not only human beings, all manifestations, whether they are trees, plants, animals, inanimate, all manifestations and their relations to other manifestations. And it knows the law of their being, what makes them tick, of their birth, and the method by which they will pursue their goal. This Jata Veda knows that in this life, so and so is going to pursue, then again Duritani, then again Duritani, then again the straight path. It knows the process that they will follow to achieve their goals. We are seeing there is an underlying oneness. There is an underlying oneness which actually is the reason for this whole manifestation to be able to sustain itself and grow. If there were not this oneness, we would not be able to live. Such is the importance of this oneness. And it takes full cognizance of the differences between one and the other, between manifestations. So, in short, this Antaratman knows the oneness and it knows the differences. It is this divine will that conducts the universe. It is one with all the things that combines, and its being, its knowledge, its actions are inseparable from each other. This whole universe is actually orchestrated by Jatavi. And all the energy that we have, which moves in this universe, which makes us move, is actually coming from this Jataveda. And all of us are united inwardly despite the multiplicity. And what the Jataveda knows, it is itself, and that is the action that emits out of it. Understood? Jataveda knows what it is, and it knows and whatever action that emits out of Jataveda is exactly the same as the knowledge. Discrepancy between knowledge and action when the action comes from the soul. But when the action comes from the limited mind or the limited vital or the limited physical, it is not the same. The knowledge and the action are far apart. And that is why it is so important for our mind and vital and physical to connect with the Jataveda. What it is, it knows. What it knows, that it does and becomes. So its being or existence, its knowledge and its action are inseparable, the Jataveda. They are all at once one. It is able to perfectly translate into actuality what it conceives in its own being. In its own being, it can see what it is. It knows that I am that supermind. I am that sun. I know what I am. I know my being. And I know I'm full consciousness. And I know that the same consciousness can come out with the perfect action from within me. But how will this action come out from within the Jataveda? Because the action has to finally come out of this limited mind, of this vital, from this body. So these three outer instruments have to connect with the Jataveda. And this Jataveda, who knows what it is, who knows what is its knowledge, who knows what is its action, from there the exact right action comes out. And in Sri Aurobindo's words, in the Life Divine, this is the inexorable execution and completion. Inexorable is that which is impossible to prevent. When the action comes directly from the soul, it is impossible to prevent the exact right action to come out.
Anjali,
Yeah.
just 1 second. Is knowledge and mind the same thing?
Mind is at the level, depends on mind with a small m. Our mind has not reached the knowledge of the
Knowledge.
Supreme. So
Okay,
it is
this
a
is
limited
supreme
mind.
knowledge.
Yes.
Okay.
And that supreme knowledge is known by the Antaratman. The
Okay.
Antaratman or Kratu knows that it is that itself that knowledge. Because we know na Purnamada Purnamidam.
Yeah.
So this Antaratman knows that the supreme knowledge is within it.
Okay.
And it knows that I am not only that supreme knowledge, I am that very existent, and the right action will come straight out of that knowledge. But the action has to come out through this body, it has to come out through this vital, it has to come out through this mind. So the importance of this mind, this vital and this body to connect with this Antaratman in all that it is doing. Right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. But but as soon as egoistic consciousness emerges, so the Antaratman knows everything. The will, the Kratu with the capital K knows. But the mind has mixtures. The mind has a mixture of ego. And at the power level, the egoistic consciousness, whose main feature is limitation and division. There this limitation and division come into play, and there comes about a disturbance, there comes about a diversion, there comes about a division and a false action in the execution of the divine will. Now the divine will is saying, ye karo, but by the time it reaches the mind, there is a little separation. By the time the mind and the vital decide on doing that action, there is a further disturbance because of the ego. By the time the body does it, there is a further separation. So the divine will gets totally diluted. What happens? Will becomes an impulsion. I'm reading from the book. Will becomes an impulsion, ignorant of its secret motive and aim. Right? What was the divine's will? By the time it reaches the mind, some dilution. By the time it reaches the vital, some dilution. By the time it reaches the action level, huge dilution. Will becomes an impulsion, ignorant of its secret motive and aim. Knowledge becomes a dubious and partial ray, not in possession of the will, the act and the result, but only striving to possess and inform them. At the lower level, because of the limitation and the interference which is imposed by the ego consciousness, the divine will actually gets diluted through the ignorance, through the impulsion, and it becomes unaware of its real purpose, motive, and aim. And similarly, knowledge turns into a partial light. That blaze of light which is there, when it actually comes out of us, it becomes a partial light of uncertainty. No more in possession of the divine will, the act and the result. No more, it is no longer there. Instead, it only seeks to possess and fill them up with itself. Ego, what does the ego want? Ego only wants to possess and to fill it up with itself. The action should be full of my ego. People should know I have done it. That I becomes so large that it takes away from the original, real divine will, that divine force that was coming out from here. By the time it comes here, and by the time it is manifested in action, it has got diluted. This is because we are not in possession of ourselves. We have not possessed this Antaratman, our true being, but only of the ego. What are we in possession of? We are in possession of only our ego. Because instead of being rooted in our real self, our true self, our soul, our Atma, we are in the grip of our ego. What we are, we know not. Very beautiful sentence. What we are, we know not. What we know, we cannot effect. So at the lower level where we have no true self-knowledge. And whatever little we know of the higher, we find it very difficult to implement it through us. First of all, we don't know who we are. And if a little bit of knowledge we do have of who we are, what we are, we find it very difficult to implement that through us. I'm reading ahead. For knowledge is real and action in harmony with true knowledge only when they proceed naturally out of the conscious, illumined, and self-possessing soul, in which being, knowledge, and action are one movement. So, should I read this again? For knowledge is real and action in harmony with true knowledge only when they proceed naturally out of the conscious, illumined, and self-possessing soul, in which being, knowledge, and action are one movement. It is only when there is true knowledge. True knowledge is the knowledge that is possessed by the will. It is only when there is true knowledge that action is in full consonance with that knowledge. Till we have partial knowledge of something, a little knowledge of something, that action that comes out of true knowledge will not emit out of us. But because we will gradually move from one step to the other. Most important is that we should keep connecting with that true knowledge which is possessed by the Antaratman. And only when both knowledge and action proceed spontaneously from the Antaratman, spontaneously from the soul, which is always in full consciousness, full illumination, full self-possession. In this stage, being, which is existence, knowledge, which is consciousness or chit, and action, which is Shakti, are one movement in this state. But in the limited state, they are all bifurcated and divided because of the presence of ego. But slowly and steadily, the ego will start dissolving when we are very clear about the focus of our life. What is it that I am moving towards? What is it that I want to reach before my body goes to ashes? What is it that I'm moving towards? And every step of our life must take us a little further towards that. Every step, every thought, every impulsion, every emotion, every action should take us bit by bit, gradually lead us towards that goal which we have made the goal of our life. Right? I think that is all that we should read for today. And we can have some discussions if there are questions.
Anjali, I have a question.
Go ahead, Sarita.
Yeah, okay. So, see, this, what we have understood is that the true will, that stands back and it is watching whatever we are doing, because at the moment, the will with the small w is, the mental will is actually controlling things. The true will knows everything because it's a Jat Veda. So it's taken like it's standing back. It's until we invoke and ask it to come forward and take control. Yeah. But here, this last sentence, in this last line of page 78, this last will becomes an impulsion ignorant. So this is the will with a capital W. So how can this become?
Where now there is electricity flowing from the meter, but the bulb is fused. So you would say, how can electricity not run through the bulb? So that will is perfect. But when it comes through this mind, which is limited, it becomes an impulsion because of the mixture of ego. So that pure will that is emerging from here, from the Antaratman, by the time it reaches the mind and gives a direction, the mind mixed with the ego makes it an impulsion which is ignorant of its secret motive. Right? We are not actually manifesting directly what the soul is bursting with. The soul is quietly, very quietly, giving us some intimations, some whisperings, but we are not actually letting that manifest through our bodies, through our vital, through our mind, because we are still very limited. So that will becomes an impulsion which is directed by our ego. It gets mixed up, gets divided, becomes limited. And
The
knowledge,
mind doesn't accept.
Haji,
No, but it is the mental will, which is the mental will is what is the which is not the perfected being. No,
mental will is not at all perfect, not at all.
So that is not perfect. But today, the capital will, the divine will, come what may, it is always going to remain pure.
This is the beginning of a sentence. The beginning of a sentence, the word is always capital. Our will becomes an impulsion. Even it is the beginning of a sentence. This W is not saying it's a divine will. It's saying
But this
the
is
will.
capital W, no? That's why I'm getting confused.
It's the beginning of a sentence. It will be capital.
Oh, acha, like that. Oh, okay. Thank you. That explains it. I was thinking of this, the divine will. Okay.
But even the divine will allows itself to become Duritani. As I gave you the example, electricity is perfect. But if there is a faulty bulb, it will flicker, na? The same electricity. When it manifests through a faulty bulb, it will flicker. So when the divine will manifest itself through a faulty mind, it will become dubious. It allows itself to become dubious because the instrument is dubious.
Okay, I get it. Yeah,
Right?
thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Anjali, I remember you had once given an example कि जैसे कभी किसी के साथ कुछ अच्छा करना है कि चलो मैंने इसको जो first दिमाग में आया, even mother has said, I think, if I remember correctly, कि दिमाग में जो आए फटाफट कर देना चाहिए before these other things, they take, participate, get into these, things, your decisions.
Absolutely. Because ego just gets in, desire gets in.
कभी कुछ अच्छा सोचा हो करने का, तो by the time you do it, you will end up doing half of it what you had actually thought, just because of these interferences,
Yes. That is why our outer instruments should all be looking inwards. All of it should be looking inwards toward this flame. But this flame is me. I am this. Tattvamasi. That thou art. This is what I am. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. Soham. He, I am. To be able to remember all the time, always to be remembering who am I. That's why when anybody went to Ramana Maharshi, he would send them back with the question, find out, who am I? This false identification has to move. For the sadhak, this false identification has to start changing. And we have to be able to identify ourselves with who am I. And then to understand that this Anjali is the instrument that I have to use. I, the soul, have to use this body, this mind and this vital as an instrument for my work, for my purpose, the purpose for which I have come on earth. This Anjali is just an identification a body which has to be used. For instance, I am an archer. I have a bow. The bow cannot decide the purpose. The purpose has to be decided by the archer कि कहाँ मारना है, क्या करना है. Can the bow take a decision? Similarly, the archer is sitting within, and this outer instrument is a bow, and it must be used as a bow by the archer. The will of the archer must prevail when this bow is being used. This mental bow, this vital bow, this physical bow must be utilized by the archer for this golden purpose of life. The purpose for which the archer decided to take life as Anjali or Geeta or Jiti or Sarita. Whatever was the decision, Om Krato Smara, Krato Smara, Krato Smara, Krato Smara. Remember, why did I take birth in this particular life? Why did I choose these particular circumstances? What was it that I wanted to learn? I do not have to criticize anybody in my circumstances because I had chosen them for a particular purpose. I must be cognizant of that purpose. I must move towards that goal which I had kept for myself, which I had decided for myself before taking birth in this particular body. Right?
Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Anjali, in the chapter 10 of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, no, that I am the consciousness inside everyone. I am the beginning. I am the middle. I am the end. उसमें वो कहते हैं ना? So, I'm just
Yes,
remembering that. Yes.
absolutely. And he is. And he is the Antaratma and he is the Agni.
Yeah.
Now that Agni we can see as Agni. We can see him as Krishna. We can see him as Ram. We can see him as Christ, as Allah. We can see him as anything.
Yeah.
But the whole purpose is to be able to see ourselves, identify ourselves with that within us.
Yeah.
That is that which is continuing. Life after life after life. Which remembers all the past lives. Which is able to forge all the lives together and move us in the right direction. So to be able to be cognizant of that and to be able to identify ourselves with that. That is the purpose.
Anjali, I have a question.
Yes, Amita?
I'm Sangeeta.
Acha Sangeeta, sorry, yeah.
Going back to GT's thing, is it, how do you know anything which comes to you then? It's an impulse, I mean, acting on an impulse, whether
Yes, even I wanted to know that, yeah.
I mean, I'm
Sometimes you make a mistake, sometimes you regret doing it, later. On an impulse you do it, but later you regret, oh, jaldi jaldi mein kar diya.
so how do you know it's the right impulse? I mean, how?
No impulse can be right because it's an impulsive action. When we step on a dog's tail, the impulsion of the dog is instantly to bite. That's called an impulse. In human beings, we can call it a reaction. But that cannot be right because it has not had the time to connect with the center and invite the center into the action. It is something that has happened like an impulsion, like a reaction. There was a connection with the divine. There was a time for that. There was an invitation to the divine. Right?
So you should always offer divine and then go with whatever you have to go with. Like first you invite the divine into your action, kind of offer it to him and then go ahead.
Yes, in everything that we are doing. And we are conscious. We are conscious of our greed. We are conscious of our anger. We are conscious of our competition. We are conscious of our jealousies. We don't need someone outside to tell us that you are jealous. We don't need someone from outside to tell us that you are very greedy. We know it. But that, when we become conscious of it, we should have the honesty to take it and offer it and say, please help. My limited mind is not being able to deal with my sense of competition, my sense of jealousy, anger, over ambition. I'm not being able to change it. I'm not being able to transform it. But I know you are Jataveda. You can do it. Please help me. But they will help us only when we offer it to them for help. Otherwise, the law is that Agni will keep quiet. It will continue to take all the experiences, keep them within itself, and not say anything. Agni will not say anything unless it is invited to speak.
And I say whatever you see in anybody, like if you it's actually there present in you. Like actually if I see greed in someone or something is actually there in me, because there was a example of Swami like Vivekanand. He didn't know
What jealousy was.
what jealousy was, because it wasn't there, and that's true.
That's a fact. Absolutely, it's a fact. That when we are able to see something in someone else, it's because some ansh of that, some part of that is there within us which is able to see it. Otherwise, an innocent person would not even be able to see it. They would just go ahead with what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Mother has said that too very often. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Anjali, I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
That if जैसे गलती से नहीं, in that rush of your emotions, you land up saying something wrong. Immediately you say कि no, ये नहीं निकलना चाहिए था, ये बहुत गलत मुंह से निकल गया. तो how do we correct that? Should we offer that? Because मेरे साथ आज ही ऐसा हुआ है. I just said something which I'm regretting कि मुझे मुंह से निकला कैसे, ये नहीं निकलना चाहिए था.
So if it is,
so
sorry.
I should, हाँ जी आप कुछ कह रहे थे?
Yeah, complete करो.
So how do I just take it back? How do
You can't take it back. Words that
how
are
do
left are
I
like an
know.
arrow which is already gone.
Gone, yes.
Yeah, but you can, if you feel that you can face that person.
मैंने किसी के लिए गलत नहीं बोला, अपने लिए ही गलत बोला है. अपने लिए ही मुंह से ऐसा निकल गया, not for anybody else, for my own self. And how do I want to, if I want to correct that, how do I correct that? Should I offer that to the Lord again?
The only way to do is to offer it to the divine and say, this is what I said. I shouldn't have said it, but it has happened. Now that it has happened, it can only be offered to you for cleanliness. You can clean it. So my consciousness needs to be cleaned of it. Please help me. Yeah?
Yeah, kind of a cleansing process only.
Yeah.
All the dirt comes out again and again to be cleansed. I've seen it, that when I offer anything to Mother, I mean, it's kind of a cleansing process, and it keeps coming again and again till I get rid of it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anjali, I have to leave. Anjali, thank you. I'm so
So
sorry.
so do I.
I think everybody does. So we can
Okay,
end,
Anjali, thank you so much. Bye.
We can end it now. Yeah. Let us end the session with Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Gratitude to the Divine.